Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Kari Anderson, principal with Insight Consulting, and today we're talking about something that can feel both exciting and uncomfortable in the nonprofit sector, partnerships and mergers. So, this session is specifically called Leveraging Skills You Don't Have, because at its core, this isn't about giving up whom you are as an organization. It's about expanding what's possible without burning out your people or stretching your mission too thin. So before we dive in today, I'd love for you to think about this question. Where does your organization feel stretched right now? You don't need to answer out loud. Just hold that in mind as we get started. So why does this matter now anyway? Let's start with reality. Across the sector, we are seeing rising community need, increased complexity, and at the same time, flat or shrinking resources. Many nonprofits are asked to do much more faster and with fewer people. And that pressure often leads to one of two reactions. And I've experienced both. Either we'll just push harder or we need a different approach. Today is about that second option. And importantly, this is not ever about a failure of leadership. It's a shift in the environment. So, a little about me as we get going. I've unexpectedly spent my entire career in this sector. Went to college thinking I'd become a surgeon and had a wild divergence into fundraising and then eventual leadership for seven nonprofit organizations. I now lead a consulting and coaching practice that focuses on making sure we build nonprofits up from the inside out. And my primary book of business is working with what I would call our small and mighty nonprofits. Those of you that are standalone, perhaps have smaller staff and smaller boards, and are really looking to leverage the resources in and around your communities. So I think back to when I was in the field and a couple opportunities that we had to merge or partner that failed really miserably. And so much of what I'm going to share with you today has to do with those failures and where certainly I've seen growth since then. So here's my reframe for all of you. Collaborations, partnerships, even mergers are often framed as the last minute and last resort survival strategy. But the healthiest examples I have seen weren't driven by crisis. They were driven by strategy. Leaders at those organizations asked, what if we didn't have to do everything by ourselves? What if growth meant depth and sustainability, not just scale? So there's certainly spectrums of partnership models that are out there, some that are successful, some that aren't, and it really depends on the organization and the needs that you're facing right now. So there is a wide spectrum. There's informal collaboration, there's affiliations or joint ventures, and there's full mergers. The key point of this is a merger is not the goal, though that may be where you end up. Alignment, impact, and sustainability, regardless of which of these is right for you, that's the goal. So, most successful relationships start small on the left side of this continuum, over at the collaboration side. So, I want to talk about what this actually looks like when it makes sense. So, when would a potential partnership make sense for your organization? Partnerships tend to make sense when organizations want to either expand reach without duplicating services. By the way, funders love that. Share specialized expertise in a particular program, initiative, or project. Reduce an administrative burden that you're currently carrying and stabilize long-term capacity. This isn't ever about losing autonomy for your organization. It's about gaining leverage. So, a helpful mindset shift that I wish would have been shared with me when I was in the field is this. What don't we need to own in order to still achieve our mission? It's an interesting question, right? So, if we didn't feel compelled, right, ego, hubris, to own something, and owning doesn't necessarily mean a capital, right? What could we do? So here's some thinking, right, to do if you're looking at a mindset shift that actually might allow you to start thinking about this for your organization. Many nonprofits, in fact, most that I've worked for or worked with, were built with a heroic mindset. What do I mean by that? We'll figure it out no matter what, right? Small and scrappy, bootstraps. But sustainability actually requires a shift from that thinking. And it means moving from we must do everything to we thrive together. Partnership is not a weakness, it's strategic clarity. So when we're thinking about alignment basics, because this is kind of the foundation of the conversation when we're actually thinking about, well, could we partner? Culture is often, and I would say not often, always the deal breaker, even when missions align. When I work with boards, specifically about around planning, right? Whether it's strategic or fund development or succession, there's an adage that I use from someone much wiser than me, Herb Keller, right? And the adage is culture eats strategy for lunch. The crux of that behind that is it doesn't really matter what the plan is if the culture is not in alignment. So when you are pondering, well, is there another entity or entities in our area that we could or should be working with? Pay attention to the following: decision making, pace, communication, how conflict not only shows up, but how conflict is identified and resolved. Two organizations can certainly care about the same issue and still be absolutely miserable partners. And we certainly don't want you jumping from frying pan into fire. So when we're thinking about mission alignment, here's some additional considerations for you and your team to think about. So mission alignment isn't about identical language. It's about shared outcomes. Ask yourself, ask your peers, are we solving the same problem in complementary ways or in competing ways? So, what are the next pieces that we should think about, again, if we want to be better together, if you will? Every organization has gaps. Typically, for our smaller ones, it's finance, HR, tech, and evaluation. So, the question actually isn't if you have gaps, it's whether you're honest about them. And I can think back to three or four organizations that I was lead staff with, and we felt like if we admitted we had gaps, that we were failing or that we were not running our organization effectively. Honesty is so important. We're not all great at everything, nor should we be. And especially if you're a small group, these are the pieces that we often suffer with, right? Strong partnerships let each organization stay in their strengths, but we're also really clear about where those gaps are and how we can effectively fill them to be better together. So I want you to think about this. A quick reflection, if you will. I want you to think really quickly, right? Not second guessing, about two to three organizations that you really admire. Ask yourself, what do they do exceptionally well? And what might we do well? Where might those strengths complement each other? No need to solve it. The idea here is we're just starting to get curious about what might be. So there certainly are practical considerations, right? Darn the lawyers, we're always there, right? But there are legal structures that we want to be able to pay attention to because some are better than others for your particular organization. Different goals always require a different structure, whether that's collaboration, an affiliation, or a merger. This isn't about thinking about the most advanced option. It's about choosing the right one for yourself. So always think about goal first, then which structure or format will follow. There's certainly financial considerations, and this is where your board is such a critical partner in this. Again, the board is responsible for managing risk, serving as a fiduciary, and making sure there's financial oversight. So they better be involved in some of these conversations just to be able to say, is this the best thing for us? Not out of fear, but out of strategy, right? So we certainly want to talk about assets for anyone that we may be partnering with. We want to talk about liabilities and funding models. And again, this is not about distrust, it's about avoiding surprises. So, operational, there's always pieces, right? This is the practicalities of how we actually get our work done. This is often where our best intentions fall apart. Staffing, making sure that we're actually clear about how the work is going to get done and how we're aligned on making sure that we don't leave anything to chance. Leadership roles for sure. Making sure if especially if there are a couple of leaders that have the same titles, how are we going to make that work out? And are we sharing responsibilities or transferring those powers? Systems. Well, there's always systems and reportings, especially when we're measuring some new evaluation components. Don't let those be surprises. And also talking through what our shared resources are, whether those are physical, tech, or administrative. When we actually move towards any sort of collaboration, we want to make sure there's actually clear agreements in place. Oftentimes, those look like scope of works, agreement templates, or memorandums of understanding. Ultimately, and the bottom line is clear arrangements and clear agreements protect relationships, not just organizations. And since our sector in particular runs on relationships, this may be one of the most important components for you to ensure is in place. So oftentimes, I think back again to when I was in the field, and certainly from conversations with past and current clients about why this might feel daunting or why we haven't actually got to the business of having conversations about a potential collaboration or a potential joint venture or a merger. We think too big immediately, right? And so many of us are just grand idealists in this sector. But our job is to start small because that helps to build this trust and momentum. It's not dissimilar to actually asking your board to be involved in fund development and fundraising activities. If we start small and give folks a win, it's much easier to be able to build momentum on this. So here's a, grand idea for not making the first big mistake. If your first collaboration involves lawyers and board votes, we're probably starting too big, right? So when I'm thinking about starting small, what could that look like for you? Joint events, shared programs, shared resources. The goal is learning, right? Kind of walking before we run, not perfection. So here are some examples, right, of pilot projects that just might be right up your alley. Joint events, right? Those could look like webinars or fundraising activities, networking events with partner organizations. Maybe it's a co-branded program, after school service, senior services. Maybe it's a trap, neuter, spay release organization that works with a foster facility. And certainly sharing resources. And we see this an awful lot post-COVID. Shared office space, admin staff, specialized expertise. I have four organizations that have actually contracted with a fractional CFO to handle all of their, business admin needs, and it's working out famously for them. So we have to measure things, right? Whenever I work with clients, and again, I think back to how I wasn't evaluated when I was in the field, it's about metrics, right? We have to evaluate these pieces on data and ideally setting up metrics that matter for your organization. So it's not just about the finances in terms of metrics. Success just isn't evaluated from a financial perspective. Some questions to consider, right? Or at least kind of to wet the whistle for all of you might look like, did this increase our impact for those we serve? Did it make our work easier? Did stakeholders have a better experience with us? And then reflect and iterate. Iteration isn't a failure, it's responsible leadership. Um, we certainly, right, want to make sure that whomever you're engaged with, whether again, collaboration, joint venture, or a merger, we have got to be better about the evaluation piece of this. If there's anything that you do when you're thinking about a potential engagement with others, it's boy, if we haven't evaluated well here in our own shop, here's an opportunity to turn over a new leaf and do this with this particular venture. So another failure, right, oftentimes, but we forget to be clear about expectations, but then we also forget about the importance of transparent communication and consistent communication. So when we wander into, right, a marriage, if you will, right, or a long-term engagement with another entity or other entities in your community, we've got multiple stakeholders that should be involved with these communication pieces. Certainly, employees, right? Contractors, volunteers that help to get the work done. Certainly the board of directors, and certainly those that you serve. These stakeholder bases don't need every detail, but they certainly do need honesty. Silence creates fear, transparency builds trust. So I'd like you again to consider another exercise that it could be during the duration of our time together, or it could be an action item homework piece that you take with you. I want you to think about who potential partners could be. And again, you don't have to decide yet, is this collaboration? Is this a joint venture? Is this a merger? Just think about the partners. Whom has shared values and complementary strengths? The idea then is to be able to start the conversation with them. A simple invitation, a purpose in that conversation, being able to identify shared interests, and scheduling that meeting. And literally, the conversation starter could look like this. We've been thinking about how our organizations could strengthen each other. Would you be open to a conversation for us to do some brainstorming about what that would look like for our communities and our missions? Perhaps, right, after that conversation, or it could be a series of conversations, you agree on something small. It's a small pilot, but we've got an end game, right? We have a date that's been set. You're picking an initiative. Maybe it's a partnership or collaboration project or program. You're going to test and launch it. You're going to define timelines. And then you're actually going to get started in terms of, getting down to brass tacks, roles, responsibilities, resources, whether those are in kind or capital. But you've set a date, right? Work backwards to actually get this off the ground to see how it works. We certainly want to measure, right? And be able to celebrate wins. And when I'm thinking about measuring and celebrating, we're tracking impact, we're measuring efficiencies. We're checking in with those stakeholders to say, hey, did you actually see a difference in our work together? Making sure that we've identified and tracked our KPIs. We may have a lot of data or a little bit of data, hopefully a little bit of data because this is the pilot project. We want to be able to collect, right, and analyze that data and be able to celebrate those milestones and early wins. What we absolutely know, right, especially these wins, everything that we achieve should be celebrated. Again, we work with people, and I've yet to meet a person when they've been successful in the ask that the nonprofit has made of them. 9 times out of 10, they'll do the work again. So this partnership work again is relational, and that recognition continues to build the energy that you'll need to consider, well, should we do another pilot program or should we test the waters in a deeper pool? So as we wrap up today, I want you to reflect on the following questions. Is there any like missioned, like size, like budget nonprofit in your area who could help to fill the gaps that you've identified? What differences would require navigation with the two of you? And a year from now, if this is the direction you wanted to go in, what would success look like for you? Partnerships are tools for growth, not just emergencies. Alignment drives success, and starting small builds trust. So, your next steps: identify one potential partner, start one conversation, and launch one small pilot program. Thanks for the work you're doing and for taking time to think strategically about sustainability for your organization. If you'd like to connect further, if you've got additional questions about how this might actually be impactful for your organization, reach out to me online. You're welcome to email me. You're also welcome to book a complimentary half-hour nonprofit therapy call on a Monday afternoon for us to talk through what this might look like for your organization. Thanks again for your time. Have a great week.